Today I'm going to walk you through how you can build your very own frame, and not only just a normal frame for Warpcast, but also a frame that can transact with any smart contract on Ethereum or any layer 2, as well as a frame that can link out to whatever website you want it to link to, and you can make it so that individual websites that you build, when shared on Warpcast, will share a specific frame. We're going to go over all of this, and we're going to do it by learning a little bit about Frog, which is a lightweight framework for Farcaster frames. It's made by the guys at WEVM, which also make VM and WAGMI hooks, sort of industry standards for building out Web3 compatible websites. Now, you probably already know that frames can help you to navigate through different sort of displays here by clicking these buttons at the bottom, but what I was talking about before is a sort of newer feature to frames, which allows you to interact with any smart contract directly from your Warpcast feed. Right here I have a simple NFT contract, and you can mint it right from the feed. Like I was saying, it handles all of the wallet connect and allows the user to connect their own wallet so that they can interact with whatever smart contract you want to point them towards. And in case you want to build your own website that can look like whatever you want and have it so that when your user shares a link to that website, a specific frame that you've built shows up when it's shared on a Warpcast feed, well, we're also going to go over that as well. Here's an example. This custom front end I'll just open up. This is a custom front end, and when you share it on Warpcast, it's going to render whatever frame you want. In this case, it's that snail jazz one that I was just showing you. Now, if you're following along, it would be best if you already know a little bit about how to build a Next.js website and how to deploy that via Vercel. And that's going to be super helpful for how we're going to deploy our frame and link it up to that website. But anyways, let's get started. We're going to navigate to Frog's docs here. And because I'm most familiar with Next.js and using that framework, that's what we're going to go with today. I'll go down here to Platforms Next.js, and they tell you that you can scaffold a Frog project with Next.js integrated via the command line interface. So I'm going to use npm as my package manager. So I'm going to copy and paste this into my terminal, and we'll get that project set up. So we're here in my Visual Studio Code terminal. We're just going to paste in this command, and we'll run it, and we'll walk through the steps here to name our project. We're going to call this Learning Frog. How about that? And it's all set up. So we're just going to go into that directory, cd learning frog, and we're going to npm I to npm install all of the requirements for Frog. And once that's installed, then we can start setting up our dev server so we can see both the website that we're building as well as the frame that's going to be hosted on that website. Okay, perfect. So now we have this Learning Frog directory in Visual Studio Code, and we can look in here to sort of see the different folders inside of this directory. Inside of app, okay, so here we have our page, and this is where we're going to have information about the actual website that we're building, of course. And under the API route, that's specifically where all of the frame information is going to live. The stuff that's going to be sort of controlling what the frame looks like, all of those individual buttons, and all of those details. Just a couple of small setup things here. We're going to go to the package.json file, and we're going to make a couple of changes to the scripts that you can see up there so that we can get access to our development environment for the website while also getting access to our development environment for the frame, because Frog comes with fantastic dev tools that make the whole development process of frames super simple. So we can run the script dev to open up our website, but we also need to add a script in here to open up these developer tools. So we're going to call this frog dev, and it will be frog dev. Perfect. So we'll go back to our terminal and making sure that we're in that directory that we created for our project, Learning Frog. Then we can spin up our two development environments. So we'll go npm run dev. This is going to spin up the sort of next web page, and then we'll open up another terminal window. We'll get into that directory, and then we'll go npm run frog dev. And this is what's going to spin up those developer tools I was talking about so that we can actually see our frame in action as we build it. So the next page is going to be defaulting to a localhost 3000. I'm going to control click it to open it up on my other browser window here. We'll go to the other one. This is going to be on a localhost port 5173. And again, I'm going to control click that, and that's going to be our one that can sort of see our new frame. So here we are on localhost 3000. This is our next web page. And you can see something here that the developers of Frog put into this next template. It says head to localhost 3000/API for your frame endpoint. This is where the information for your actual frame is going to be hosted. And that's particularly important when we take a look at our developers tool, our developer tools sort of page here. I'm going to flip over here. It says enter frame address. In order to get all of this information about the frame that we're building, the developer tools needs to know, okay, hey, where am I actually looking for this frame? How do I bring that in to this developer environment? So luckily we know where to look. We're going to copy and paste localhost 3000, paste that in here, making sure we have HTTP : and we're going to add API to the end of it because we know that's where our frame lives. And I press go here, and it should pop up with fantastic. This is the developer environment where we can help sort of see the frame that we're building. Let's talk about some of the details here. So obviously there's a lot of information here. It might be a little bit overwhelming at first, but all you really need to take a look at first is right here. This is the representation of the frame, and what we're seeing here is actually represented in the code of the sort of repo that we scaffolded earlier. And this is probably a good time to talk about an important concept for developing frames with Frog, and that's two sort of different items. The first one is the image, and the second one is the intents. Okay, image, that's a little bit self-explanatory. That is referring to whatever is displayed here in the image section of the frame. But intents, maybe a little bit less self-explanatory. The intents are basically all the different ways that a user can interact with your frame, represented down here with the different buttons that they can click and the different sort of text inputs that they can do here with this basic frame that they've built here as the default. If you click a button, it'll come and say, okay, nice choice, you've selected apples. We're sort of getting that information from the user's selections. We can reset it. You can enter a custom fruit here. Let's say pineapple, beautiful, and we'll click a random button here and it got my information, pineapple. So all that to say, this is the image for the frame, and these are the intents. But now let's flip back to our IDE. For me, that's Visual Studio Code, and we'll take a look at where this code is that's actually rendering this frame. And you can find that for this example underneath this API in routes directory. So we'll go here to root.tsx, and this is what's going to bring up all of the information about this specific frame that we were just playing with that returns the sort of apple selection and it has that text input. All of that logic and all of that information is simply in this only like 70 lines of code. It's pretty easy once you get the hang of it, and we're going to go over exactly how you can build out your own logic and your own functionality in this frame. Now, in the Frog docs, it says that Frog is a framework built on top of Hono. I'm going to be honest with you, before playing around with Frog, didn't even know what Hono was, but it's okay because you don't really need to know. It's pretty self-explanatory once we get into the code, so just thought I'd share that with you. Let's go over this root file and really find out what all this is doing. We start off with some imports and then some boilerplate for setting up this app. You can sort of copy the screen here, or if you follow the same way I set this up, you're not going to have to sort of play around with this too much. But when we scroll down a little bit more, we get the first sort of app.frame. What's going on here? This is the first actual frame in the code. And that's where image and intents, those two concepts we were talking about before, this is where it comes into play. You can see here that this frame returns a response that includes an image, a whole bunch of details about that image, and if we scroll down a little bit more, we see that it's also returning intents. The image that's returned is what's going to display in that image section, and the intents are going to be the buttons and the different inputs that the user can interact with for the frame. For this image part, you can provide that with a link to an image that you want to use in the frame. That's one option, but you can see the second option here that allows you to sort of use these JSX components here to put together your own sort of design that you want to be output as the image. And you're probably familiar with how this looks if you've built any kind of front-end websites before. And in the intent section, there are only two different types of intents. There's the text input that we saw saw, as well as the buttons that you can click. The only thing here is that for buttons, there are a bunch of different sort of sub-actions that those buttons can do that you indicate by sort of accessing a property of that button sort of component here, that button intent. For example, we're going to be playing around in a little bit with button.transaction, and that's going to sort of indicate, hey, this button is supposed to actually do some sort of transaction action on a smart contract that we're going to identify. Another common button option is button.link, and this allows you to indicate a sort of separate website that you want the frame to redirect the user to. It will just take an href property with the sort of website that you want to go to at song.camp, for example, and it'll send the user to that website when you click that button. Now, just to make sure our development environment is working, let's make some changes here and make sure that they're reflected in the development environment. Instead of entering your custom fruit, let's say enter your favorite movie. You gotta love the Canadian spelling of favorite there. We'll go with first, let's hit up The Godfather, then we'll go Star Wars, and we'll go Barbie. Let's go ahead and change the value properties here. We'll make that match and do the same here for Star Wars and do the same here for Barbie, and we'll save it. Now we'll go back to our dev tools and we'll hit the refresh button, and those changes should be reflected, and they are. Boom, we've got enter your favorite movie, The Godfather, Star Wars, and Barbie. Now let's see if they work. They should, because we changed those value properties inside of the example. We'll click The Godfather. Beautiful. It shows up in the display here. We'll reset it. Let's go Barbie. Okay, that works too. We'll reset it and we'll go Oppenheimer. Let's test my spelling, and then we'll click, and boom, that got passed as well to the intent, or not the intent, the image of the next frame. But how does our front end know to display the selection that we've selected or that custom text? Well, actually, Frog makes it pretty easy, because they allow you to provide all of the context of the user's actions on the previous frame for the new frame that's being rendered, so that you can use those inputs in your display for the next frame. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's go back to our route.tsx file. Again, that's inside of our API folder inside of our project, and take a closer look at exactly how this works. We can see here for the frame that we have that it's provided with this sort of argument of C, which is that context object. And inside of that object, we can get a whole bunch of different values, and you can see us grabbing them here, the button value and the input text and the status. These are all properties of the context or the C object that we can sort of destructure here to use them inside of our rendering of our next frame however we want to. When I first started coding, this whole object destructuring thing was a little bit confusing for me, but essentially these are all just different properties of the C object that you can sort of instantiate through this syntax, but you could access it in a different way too. Like if we wanted to take out button value here, you could also sort of create that by saying const button value equals C dot button value. Boom, and that would do the exact same thing as sort of destructuring it here. And here we're just creating a variable that we're going to be using later on when we're coding our image for the frame that renders after the fact. Here we say fruit. Well, let's change that now, because it's not actually a fruit anymore. Now it's a movie. And it's saying that that movie is going to be equal to the input text that the user input, or the button value. Again, both of those coming from the context of the user's actions before this re-rendering of the frame. So let's just scroll down here and change wherever it says fruit, so it now says movie, so that the frame continues to function. But yeah, that gives you a better idea of the context that's passed to the frame, just telling you what the user previously did. It also has status here, which is used to sort of conditionally render the image here. You can see that, okay, if the status equals response, then we want it to look a little bit different than if the status isn't response. Let's head back to the dev tool so we can get a better grasp on this. So we already know all about this part of the dev tools, but there's another helpful sort of section, and you can see that right down here. Let's zoom in for a closer look. We're specifically going to go to the context because this provides the sort of context that's used to render the frame conditionally based on these different actions the users have taken. Here in the context section, we can see all of the information that Frog puts together to actually render the frame so that clients like Warpcast can read it. When we scroll down here, we see a couple of important ones. We see all the different button indexes for the different things that people can click on the frame, different state, and also in here, if we scroll in here, we can see that one we were talking about before, which was status, and you can see it's initial right now instead of response. That's because we actually haven't made any sort of selections here on this frame yet. This is the initial frame, which sort of corresponds, like you just saw, to this initial status. Now, if we instead interact with this frame now, I'll scroll back up here for you, then that context is going to change, and so will the rendering of the image. We'll click Star Wars, boom, the context changed, and now if we scroll back down, we can sort of see, okay, look, the status, now it's response, and by using that status property of the context object, we're able to render out different things, different buttons, based on the sort of type of frame that we're seeing right now. So all of this logic for the entire frame is inside of this app.frame creation here. And you can see that even when the user interacts with it by clicking the buttons and inputting text, well, it sort of renders the same frame again, just with a different context, and using that different context, you're able to have a different image and different selections for the intents down here. But what if we have different combinations of images and intents that we sort of want to switch between for the user as they're using this one sort of master frame that we've created? They've made that super easy to do with Frog. Let me show you what I'm talking about, because you can make it so if you click a certain button, it goes to an entirely different frame that has different images and different intents as well. I think it's going to make a lot more sense once you see what I'm talking about. To make this example clearer, let's clean all of this stuff up. We're going to take away all of the different styling of this div as well as this div. We're going to close that up as well, and we're going to so even take this out. So just this frame will just return the one div, and we're going to say this is our first frame. We'll clean up some of these intents as well, take out a lot of this stuff. We're just going to only use one button to make this example super clear. Take out the text button here, or the text input, and we're just going to have one button, and that button is going to say, go to the next frame. And because we're not using any of this, we actually don't need any of the context anymore, so we're going to back that out as well. And here we have like the simplest representation of a frame and how you build it in Frog. We've got our image and we've got our intents. Now in the exact same route file, we can copy and paste this and make a sort of second frame inside of our master frame. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We'll paste this in, and now we have a new frame here, and we're going to say this is /second, and that's going to be the path to our new frame. And so let's make these edits here. This is our second frame, and we'll just go to the next frame there. So we've got the only difference between these two frames right now is this is our first frame and this is our second frame. Now, how do we make it so that when you click on this button, it will actually take you to the next frame at the /second route? Well, we can do this by specifying something called an action in our first frame. You know how I only said there was image and intents? Well, there's another one here in the response that we can include, and that is an action. Boom. Now, for this action, this is just telling the frame where the next sort of post request should be. What frame should we be rendering next after you make a certain action on this first frame? So we have this path down here, that's /2. So that's what we're going to put here in this action. And we're going to go /2, put our comma in so it looks all good. Now, when we make that update, and when we save this and go back to our dev tools and click the button, go to next frame, it will know to go to this second route here. This action property is set to second, so it knows, hey, go to this other frame and render that one. Oh, and you know how I said we didn't need all of that styling for this div? In order to actually make this text show up in the dev tools, I realized you kind of have to have the styling in there just to tell the text how to render. So we're going to put that back in there, and now let's go take a look at our frame in the dev tools. Okay, so once we refresh this, just as we wanted, it's going to show that new text. This is our first frame, and we've got go to the next frame as our button here. One extra thing to note here, take a look at the route. Remember that initial frame was hosted at localhost 3000/API. That's that first frame. Now, when we click this go to next frame button, that route is going to change, and it's going to show /2, like the name for that second frame that we made, the route path. So let's give that a try, and hopefully that works. We'll click go to next frame. Boom. This is our second frame shows up, and you can see, okay, this frame and all of the information about it, even though it's in that same route file, is actually hosted at a different location, API/2, the name that we gave it. Okay, let's play around with a different button option. We've got that standard button, and it doesn't have any value right now because we're not using that for any context in another frame. But like, let's say we wanted to add another button here, and let's add button.link. This is what we're going to use in order to link a user to a different web page, right? So we'll close that off, and we'll say, go to the video. And you'll see it's saying the property href is missing in this type, so we're going to add that property href equals, and then a link to some web page. I've got a YouTube video here. We're going to put it in there. If you can see the end of that link, act like you didn't. So now we've got the go to the next frame button, and we've got that button.link. It should, again, if I haven't screwed this up, take us to a new website. And when we refresh it, we see that new intent, this next link button. You can see it indicates that with this sort of link out icon in the dev tools, super helpful. And when we click it, it should give us a warning, hey, you're leaving Warpcaster, or you're leaving where you currently are. We'll accept that, and we'll click continue, and then it'll open up the link to whatever we want to open, which I had to do it to you. I'm sorry about maybe this is a boomer meme now at this point, but it never gets old for me. Now, while you're building, even if your frame works in DevTools, it's pretty important to actually test if it's going to work on Warpcaster proper. And the only way to do that is if you deploy your application, your web page, so that you can link the actual hosted web page on Warpcaster and see if it renders correctly. Now, I mentioned earlier that it would be helpful if you know already how to deploy an application on Vercel, and that's what we're going to do right here. I'm not going to explain it too thoroughly, but we're deploying our application to Vercel, and so that we have an actual production web page that we can link in when we're actually validating that our frame is going to work on Warpcaster. So I'm going to go back to my terminal. I'm going to go git init. initialize that, and then we'll go use the GitHub command line and go GitHub repo create. Follow these. We're going to push our local repository to GitHub. This is the path. Learning frog is perfect. We'll make the description. We're learning how to make frames with frog. Beautiful. We'll make this one public. And we'll add a remote, and we'll call that remote origin. Fantastic. Now we can go git add all, git commit, first commit. Perfect. Let me slide this up actually so you can see the final stuff. And then we'll go git push set upstream origin master. And that will push all of our changes to this repo so that we can deploy it via Vercel. We'll head to our Vercel dashboard, add a new project. We'll add this newly created repo, that learning frog, import that. All good, deploy. And now once that's deployed, it's going to give us an actual web page that we can take the URL from and check it on a special frame validator that's specific to Warpcast. And while it's deploying, let's navigate there now. You can see here in the bottom left-hand corner of our dev tools, we've got the frog documentation, which we've looked at. There's the GitHub repo, but we're going to look at Warpcast frame validator. This is just going to make sure that our frame actually works on Warpcast. Just make sure that there's no problems with the dev tools and that it is actually comparing properly to how it's going to look on Warpcast. So we'll open that up, and it'll take us here, and it's going to ask us for a URL where that frame is hosted. Now, we can't use localhost on this like we can with DevTools. So we're going to take that domain from Vercel that has just sort of been just spun up. We're going to add /API to it, remember, because that's where it's actually hosted. And then we should be all Gouda. And boom, our project has deployed. So we're going to go to it. We're going to take that that URL, learning-frog.vercel.app. We'll copy that, and let's head back to this. Where was it? To the frame validator on Warpcast that we got to through our dev tools. I'm going to paste that in. Remember, we're going to add API, and when I hit refresh here, hopefully we're going to see that frame, and hopefully it's going to work. And come on. Let's go. This is our first frame. We got go to our next frame. We got our Rickroll button here on go to the video. We got go to the next frame. Boom, this is our second frame. It's got all of the proper information that we were looking for. We've got a functioning frame, and now if we were to post that on Warpcast, it would be in our feed. And we can even double check that. I'll copy this, and let's go actually over to a Warpcast client here. Here I am. Here's my account. Follow me at Russ. I only have like 10 followers, 15 followers, so hit me up there. I would appreciate it. But we'll go here and we'll go cast, and then if we paste in that route, then it'll recognize that this is our frame. We can't play around with it in this sort of post, but we can post the frame by just dropping in that URL to the cast that we're about to put out there. So already just with that, you can see you can get pretty creative with these frames. You can render anything as an image. You can play around with those intents just with redirecting and sending to different frames and having different things pop up. You can get really creative with it. But I'd say play around with it a little bit, but we're going to go on. This is kind of like a part 2, an extra bonus content here, because we're going to get into how you can actually execute a smart contract function right from a frame. This is the sort of next level of maybe frames 102 for you. As some of the little prerequisites for this one, it would be helpful if you already know how to deploy a smart contract. We're going to use a simple 1155 NFT contract. We're going to deploy that. We're going to take the ABI from that contract, and we're going to use that to actually tell our frame, hey, what function do we want to call on this smart contract? Again, we're not going to go super into depth in that. We're going to go more into depth on how you can actually link up this contract by using the ABI and the contract address to your frame. So we're back in our same route.tsx file, and we already know that you can have different frames hosted at different routes here, and that they're indicated what their names are right here. Now you can also have individual not frames at a different route, but a action at a different route. In this case, a transaction at a different route. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Just like we would create a new frame by sort of copying and pasting this, there's a different type here that I'm going to paste in. You can find some of these details at at the or on the Frog docs under transactions. But you can see here, if we go app.transaction, well, then we can actually host a transaction at a given root. And just like a frame, this transaction can take any of the user values that they've inputted through this context. And you can sort of deconstruct them to get access to them to use inside of this response or this return that's coming from this transaction. Right here is where you include all of the information about the smart contract that you're interacting with, the name of the function on that smart contract that you want to call, as well as the contract address and the ABI. Let's go through these one by one. So first, you need to provide the ABI for the contract that we're going to be interacting with. I'm going to do that by creating a different file here. Let me slide this over so you can see where I'm creating it. I'm going to create it in this sort of same API /routes folder, and we'll go new file. I'm going to name this abi.js, and I've got the ABI sort of copied from the contract that I've written and deployed. We're going to go export const ABI equals, and then we'll paste that ABI. Again, you can get this either from whatever tool that you're using to deploy these smart contracts, be it Hardhat, Foundry, or maybe Remix Ethereum if you're using the sort of web IDE. So we'll go back to our route.tsx file, and now we got to import that ABI so we can actually use it inside of this transaction. So we'll go back up here to our imports, and I'll go import ABI from /ABI.js. Boom. And now we should have access, now that we've imported it, to that ABI constant that we defined in our ABI file over here. So we're going to be able to use that. We don't have to mess up our route.tsx file and have the whole ABI there. We'll just import it. Beautiful. That solved the error, and now we've provided the ABI for our contract. The next step here is providing the chain ID. Using EIP 155, we can sort of just define the ID so that we know what chain we're interacting on. Like Ethereum mainnet is chain ID 1. We have different IDs for different layer 2s, so you can find that chain ID by you can honestly just Google search like Optimism chain ID or what have you. For us, we're going to use the base Sepolia testnet here, which is chain ID 84532. Next up, a little bit self-explanatory, we have a function name. This is the name of the function that as it's represented in your smart contract. Again, we're not going over how to deploy a smart contract, how to write it, that type of stuff outside of the scope of this video, but I'll just give you a sample here. I brought in this Solidity file that I wrote, and this is the contract we're interacting with. Super simple ERC 1155 token, and you can see here we've got a function mint, and that's the function that we're going to be calling. It doesn't take any arguments. You don't have to pay anything for it. It just mints one token to whoever calls the function. So we're not going to need to provide any arguments to this function from within our frame. And finally, for our example, we've got this to property, and that is just where you define the contract address, wherever your contract was deployed, what its address is, so that we know, hey, what smart contract are we interacting with? Now, there are a couple of other properties here that we can use. One that I said we're not going to need to use is args. You can do any arguments that you need to pass to the contract that you need to interact with. You can also do a value property here. That's just whatever amount of ether that you might want to sort of send along with this transaction if it's a payable function. So you can use those as well, but for our example, we don't need them because there aren't any arguments. You don't have to send any funds to this function in order to mint. You just got to pay gas. Okay, so now we have all the information for our transaction here, but how do we actually trigger it from our frame? Well, it has to do with that button.transaction option that button has, right? So we're going to go back up here. We've got the button go to the next frame. As you can see, we've got the go to video, the sort of redirect the link button. Let's add another one here. We've got button.transaction, and that's what we're going to use to mint the NFT. Okay, so we need a property called target. This is just saying, okay, where am I actually going to get the information for this transaction? You can see here, maybe you couldn't, it was behind me before. A property target is missing. So that target is just saying, okay, what is the route, just like this frame has a route, what is the route of the transaction? And we define that down here in the same location, and that's right here, /mint. So we need to add that target. Easy, we'll just add it because we know exactly what route we need, and the target is /mint. So when we click this button, it's going to go to this transaction, take all of the, and it's going to provide our frame with all of this information about the contract and what function we're calling on it, and all of those details, what chain we're calling it on with the chain ID. So let's head over to DevTools and see if that worked. Okay, beautiful. We refreshed it and we're seeing everything we expect to see. The two buttons, the two intents that we had before, the Rickroll video redirect link. And now we have this new intent, this transaction button. It says mint the NFT just like we thought, and it indicates that it's a transaction with this little lightning bolt icon. So let's see what happens when we click it. Let me zoom in here a little bit so maybe you can see it more clearly. I'll click mint the NFT. I'll slide this up so you have a better view of it. And you can see, okay, now we can connect wallet. The user brings their own wallet to transact. It's not like an embedded wallet or anything like that. And you can connect any of these wallets that are sort of installed on your machine. So for me, I'm going to connect my MetaMask. This is going to pop up, and I'm going to go to this first account here that has some Sepolia ETH on base. We'll go next and connect. Boom. I'm connected. Now, when we go mint the NFT, we see review transaction. It shows the proper address that we indicated in our /mint transaction route that we set up, the proper chain through EIP 155, the contract. Oh, sorry, this is the address that's connected rather. And then the contract address that we indicated and the name of the function. And now all we need to do is click send transaction, check wallet. I'm going to sign this. Boom, 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 boom. Let's go MetaMask, confirm, transaction pending. That'll just be baked into your frame. And transaction confirmed. It already has a pre-populated view button. Let's see what happens when we click it. I'm going to click view. I'm thinking it's going to, oh yeah, beautiful. There's a base scan. Let me actually bring it in here so you can see it. And we'll zoom in a little bit. Success. We minted this NFT from this contract. Awesome. Let's go take a look at it. Usually in testnet, NFTs like this show up fastest on Rarible. So let's go over and look at that for this address and see if we actually minted anything. So I went to Rarible's testnet, and you can see here it is popped up. This is actually an audio NFT that can play some music, and we got this picture of this nice snail listening to his iPod Shuffle. Yeah, so it minted, and there's your transaction happening right from the frame. And if you deploy that, then you can sort of validate it in that Warpcast validator to make sure it'll actually work in the feed. And there you go. You can mint directly from the Warpcast feed. I think that's pretty cool. All right, let's take things just one step further. I promise this is the last one. You're not going to listen to me ramble for any longer than this. Right now, what if you want to have a different website, something that has any kind of functionality that you want to do anything on it on the front end, and you wanted to share that link, or have when users share that link to that website, have that populate as a specific frame, have a frame served at a specific website. Like right now, it's not the best the way we have it set up so far. Let me show you what I'm talking about. You'll remember that when we first started this video, we had this sort of Next.js boilerplate front end set up. Let's just imagine that this boilerplate front end was something custom that you put together, something that you actually wanted users to use. And let's say that this web page goes viral and you have people talking about it on Warpcast, and you want them to be able to share it. So they go to their browser bar, they're going to copy that, they're going to go over to Warpcast, like we are right here. They're going to try to cast it, and then they're going to paste it, and then, my frame's not there, even though this is where my frame is hosted. How come it's just a normal embed here? What's going on? Well, you might remember that the frame actually lives at the API route of this page. So if we went API here and we sort of repasted it in, Boom. Okay, there's our frame. But we don't really want our users to have to append that /API route to the web page that we're sharing, right? Like when they're on the browser, they're just on this learning frog Vercel.app. We want them to just be able to share that directly and not have to tell them to add /API. And now, luckily, there's a way that you can take all of the frame information that's hosted at /API and get your base route, this without this slash, get that base route to actually serve up the frame exactly how you want it, so that when users share it, it actually defaults to that frame. Let me show you how to get that set up. So we'll go back to our Learning Frog project and the folder for it right here, and you'll remember that, okay, we know that API and everything under here, that's where all the frame information is, but the actual web page that's hosted at that base route is all inside this page.tsx file. You'll be familiar with this if you're familiar with the app router for Next.js. So let's go take a look at this page.tsx, and that's where we're going to see, let me slide this over, all of this boilerplate information about this next page. Remember this, I'll show you over here again, this sort of next page in our development server that we've got set up. This is where all of this is. So let's just get rid of all that. We don't want that next boilerplate. Let's just add some text in here saying, this is the web page I want to share my frame from. Actually, will be a little more description than that. We're just descriptive. What it actually is we want to co-locate my frame at this page route, so that when the user shares it, it populates the frame. And when we check out our web page, okay, now all that next boilerplate is gone and we've got this text that we've inputted. Fantastic, but that isn't going to solve our problem yet. No, what's really going to solve our problem is up here in this generate metadata. This will already be set up for you if you scaffolded this project using that command from Frog that set up our next application. If you've been following along, you should be set up like that. But we use this generate metadata function to actually grab all of the metadata of the frame from that API route so we can serve it up here. Now they've got some stuff in here that makes it easier to go between production and in your development environment. We're going to skip over this for now, just to keep things simple. We're going to get rid of that, and all you need to do is paste in the URL that your frame is hosted at. So for us, we deployed that at learning-frog.vercel.app, and remember where the frame is actually hosted is /API, so that's going to be in there too. Now we just save this. We're going to go back to DevTools, and we're going to check that if even at localhost /nothing, not /API, if it's serving up the frame as we want it to. So we're back at our DevTools, and now up here at localhost 3000/API, this is where it has previously been served and is still being served. But now that we've got that generate metadata function on our next page, our Next.js page that is hosting our front end, well, that page should also serve up this very same thing because we're grabbing the metadata from the /API route. So let's go in there and remove that API, and when we navigate to it, it should load the exact same thing. Boom. There's our frame, localhost 3000, there's no /API. That means that once I deploy this with the changes, that all we need to do is copy and paste in to Warpcast the base route for our website, or our users could do that, and it should render this frame, even though when users navigate to this route, they're going to get whatever web page you build. Okay, so I've pushed those updates and deployed them on Vercel. So now when we go back to this frame validator on Warpcast, we can check to make sure this is all working. This is where it was before, right, at the /API route. I'm going to refresh that. That should work. Okay, beautiful. Now let's get rid of that and just paste in without the API route, just like a user would if they're trying to share your application. And we click refresh. And just as we expected, we've got our frame working up here and functional, our rickroll function, our go to next frame, all this stuff is working just as we expected it to. And as one last test, we'll actually do it in the cast button on Warpcast. We'll go in here, we'll paste it in without the API route appended to it, and we've got our frame ready to post. That means that you could have any kind of front end, any functionality that you wanted hosted there, and it would serve up whatever frame you specified in that generate metadata function when a user shares it on a frames compatible platform. I hope all of this has been helpful for you. I know that going through the process of making this video has been helpful for me in solidifying some of the concepts in my own mind. So happy frame building. I hope you have some fun with that and have some fun using Frog. It's a great set of tools here and something that I know is going to be supported going into the future, given that it's coming from the WAGMI and the VM guys, and those folks always build incredible developer tools. So I'm pumped to keep using it. And if you haven't already done so, follow me over on Warpcast. Again, we got to get this number up from 15 followers. I've been slacking hard. So follow me if you have any questions. Hit me up over there. But with all that said, hope this video has been helpful, and I'll see you next time.